Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's thank you all. We've been getting really good comments on, I guess you get them on Facebook, right?
Yeah, yes, most of them on Facebook.
But
Some
anyway,
are coming through on the website.
People seem to be enjoying the conversations, and we're going to be continuing them today. This is February 7th, and we are working on the second half of our discussion on analysis. And today we're going to be talking about plant analysis specifically. Last time in the first portion of this section, we talked about magnetometer readings and different types of analysis and research that was done. Now we're focusing on the plants. So it makes sense to focus on the plants. The phenomenon is happening in the plants. You're seeing these designs. The designs are evolving. They start as simple circles. You coin them crop circles. They quickly begin to evolve into anything but a simple circle. The first thing that you notice about the plant, and you, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you are convinced at this point that these things that you're finding cannot be made by people. You can't find footprints going in. You
at the time that we started, yes.
At that time.
Oh, we've been totally convinced. Having walked into the first set that I'd ever seen, I had nothing to judge anything by other than my footsteps, my footprints were behind me. The plants were bent behind me as I walked across the field, but they weren't in front of me. I could find nothing in the field that showed any evidence of people, and the symmetry, the beauty, and the sounds that I was hearing at that time and entering that first crop circle totally convinced me that this is something very unusual and not man-made.
So to remind people who may not have seen the earlier one, the sounds that you were hearing were the clicking sounds of the heads hitting each other as the plants were starting to rise themselves back up from the circular arrangement. And the fact that the plants were alive and not dead was part of what was so convincing, because plants that once these circles have been visited by hundreds of people, the plants are killed and you know, they don't have these same features that you see first time in. So some of the features that you noticed at the time was something that became known as the magical bend.
The magic bend,
and I'm sure you can put a picture of that up into this. And the magical bend was a almost 90-degree turn of the plant. And this is important because of what happens later, but this 90-degree turn of the plant at the first or second knuckle from the roots, that make it look as though the plant had been growing upright and something had interacted with this nodal point and dropped the plant over. And in the beginning, that was almost your litmus test as to what was real and what wasn't it?
Well, we were still gathering data. I mean, I think we were leaning in the direction that we've got something, but it took years before us to feel that we really may well have nailed a litmus test. The bending of the plants, as you say, the nodal points was, and of course is still important because it is a natural phenomenon, which none of us were plant experts at the time. I'd not particularly stopped to study any field anywhere, anytime. So I didn't know what I was looking at, but the farmers sort of filled us in with the initial starting point that these nodal points, like the knuckles on your finger, will expand once they've been flattened to the ground to right angles, as you said. The sun then starts that process of lifting them back up.
Right, and so how the sun interacts with them later on, but the plants are, so it's important kind of to understand when you decided that the magical bend actually wasn't a feature specifically to crop circles, but existed among all the crop, is because seeds are dropped in a hole. Some of them grow straight up, some of them come out to the side and grow up. And those ones that come out to the side and grow up because they need the room have this bend to 90 degrees.
Right. Well, you're referring to oilseed rape.
Yes.
That I was visualizing that you were still referring to the wheat, which was the first ones we saw. It was several years, 1986, before we saw the very first crop circle in oilseed rape in canola, as it's known in the United States. And now describing what you're describing was indeed extremely important because I certainly made a major point publicly of the fact that here we had a bend that could not possibly be created by any human involvement. This was something, as you say, and perhaps this was the litmus test. That is in 86. But as you're describing also correctly, is that when several seeds are placed into the soil during the seeding process, there are a number of seeds that go in. They all germinate at approximately the same time, and they all try and do the natural thing. Well, as they're growing, some are squeezed out of that vertical by the fact that they're all in the same very small confined area, and they struggle by bending first to try and basically find a route to the sun when they're crowded out. And that bend is natural, but we didn't realize it.
Right.
And it is that bend that we put us on a false trail for quite a while.
Right. And after you recognized that and started looking at the plants outside of the crop circle that were growing up, you saw that demonstrated.
Yeah.
So I think this is important for a number of reasons as we continue here. The other thing that you noticed that had a lot of importance in those first few years is that after a crop circle appeared in a field, its design was discernible in the crop the next year. Can you describe?
Yes, others made a particularly big deal of that because they were attracted to the photography as much as anything. I think those that were not attracted by science were attracted by the beauty, which of course many people were, and the aerial photographs. By going up into the air, one could see something that they couldn't see on the ground. Particularly was a repeat of the pattern that was the initial crop circle up to a year later was, as they call them, a ghost of the original. Was what they were looking at was the fact that when it was a crop circle, it was entered and visited by many people. The seeds of that appropriate plant or crop were knocked out by those people walking over it and germinated later the next year of that particular plant. So you have roughly a 2 or 3 year cycle with most of the farming, where if it's wheat 1 year, it's cycled to barley another year, and it's laid dormant to rest for another year. So the wheat field becomes a barley field the next year, but in that barley field is the regrowth as a ghost of a wheat circle, the original.
So those are the seeds that fell out of the heads as they were knocked down.
That's right, and germinate into a green and really quite impressive repeat, a version of the original crop circle, known as a ghost circle.
And that made people really wonder whether, not understanding exactly the mechanism, seeing these plants growing faster than the rest of the field in these designs, it made people wonder whether there were nutritional variants in the crop as a result of having been
I think if I can just break in there, because that too is important, and it's very important in understanding something that is still not fully understood. And one here can look at a number of things, and I think they're rather interesting. Is that a healthy seed, healthily germinated and growing, gives you a factor, we'll say, of 1, whatever that length is. A plant that is crushed, or not necessarily crushed to disfigure it, but interfered with and made anything but fully fit, then germinates and indeed grows faster and taller than the original one, which was completely healthy and untouched. That has been picked up in a number of other research efforts on the UFO front. For example, Travis Walton had his experience, and it is known where that experience was with a UFO and a beam of light that comes down and claims allegedly took him up, was seen by one of the guys in the vehicle near him as he levitated into this beam of light up into a UFO. Most people know the Travis Walton story, and if you don't, it's very easily available. Several books written by Travis about that. But in returning several years later and excavating, cutting off and researching the trees very close to that beam where he was removed, the actual circle of that year is many times wider. So in other words, the growth of that tree was expanded, at its growth rate was expanded. This in the similar way, for perhaps different reasons we don't know, to some of those crop circles.
Okay, so let me understand. Travis Walton, whose book was Fire in the Sky, had this encounter with the UFO, and the trees in that encounter were impacted such that their growth was expanded.
That's right.
Are you saying that happened in the crop circles as well?
Well, I don't know about a UFO causing it, but what I'm saying is that when you interfere with plants in ways, mechanical ways, you can also repeat that same effect. What I'm suggesting might be happening also is that, remember, we've got a number of these that we cannot prove are made by people. And so what are they caused by? If we're looking at some beam, some energy effect from above, causing them to be involved in its creation phase, that the same phenomena exists. I mean, it's no more than an idea. It's no more than a thought. There's no evidence to suggest that's what's happening. But there is evidence that plants grow looking to be more healthy. I mean, it was
when they're confronted with challenge.
Which again, I think, and you're a doctor, I am not, but I think there's something like that effect can be suggested as research within the medical profession for the body. Once it's challenged on one illness for a long period of time, suddenly that illness is dropped back into the background because something else is there to be dealt with. So, there's maybe a natural nature at work here.
Well, we can say that the biological adaptation to stress creates a stronger plant or human or whatever else.
Right. Well, that's, yeah.
So what we can't say, I think I'm correct in saying this, and tell me if I'm not, we cannot say that all of those ghost circles or these plants that grew faster only in circles that were made by some force other than human.
Oh, no, we can't say that at all. I mean, I think it's probably going too far to say that a measure of seeing them as a ghost is something to do with the fact that growing faster. It's simply the fact that there's a secondary germination of the original plants. I think that's all you can say.
Okay, well, so people became interested in this idea of plant growth being affected and nutritional values being affected. And so I think the first scientific look into that was by Sheffield University. Is that correct?
Right. Well, yes, it was. At the very beginning, we had many questions about the plants for reasons that you've stated. Clearly, the phenomenon is appearing in plants. So the original research started with Dr. Wainwright and Dr. Davies at the Department of Biology in University Sheffield, England.
That was 1990?
I think it was 1990, 1991, around there. That was shortly followed by an approach by William Levengood, to Pat, but we were working as a team.
Let's hold on that and come back to it, because we still want to talk about HSC laboratories. So what did Sheffield find out?
Well, they looked, that's just starting from the fact that you can be analyzing a plant for many, many things. And it would cost a fortune and many tests over long periods of time to check it all. So they went in with a list. Wainwright basically headed that at Sheffield for us. They were working with us for our team. And it was a whole checklist down from the cellular level up through growth rates, color changes, all kinds of things. Went through the checklist and found absolutely nothing. So that was the Sheffield University work. That was the first, and it was never, I know we're going to get through detail of the others involved, but that result, that conclusion was effectively the repeat every time. It was never beaten in so much as it was never shown to be wrong. In other words, a negative continued to be a negative all the way through the plant analysis when it was looked at carefully. That's not what was claimed, but we're going to get to that in detail.
Okay, so with the Sheffield work, they did not find anything unusual in the plants.
Nothing
that were involved in that.
Yeah, and so just to add a little bit, I don't know the detail. I do have the detail in the archive, but they also did look at the soil. It was a very simplistic, reeled off the top, basic, lime content from fertilization, fertilizers, and so on. But that also turned out to be negative. Nothing unusual, in other words.
So then the next people who got involved in a laboratory type of way was HSC laboratory, and they were taking the plants, taking the starch out of the plant, crushing it, and then adding water to it.
They took the plants from the crop circles and controls. Yes, they mashed it down to extract the moisture within the plants, and then they formed crystals from that moisture of the content, and under microscope compared the lattice structure of the starch crystals on the inside with the controls from the outside
of the formation.
And
they were considerably different, which reminds us of the work that Emoto did in his book Messages in Water, where he had people focusing on water with good thoughts or prayers or positivity, and focusing with negativity, and very, very different crystals forming in the water.
Very, and yes, the difference between Emoto's work and HSC was that Emoto had a psychic component because of people's visualization, and indeed the structures that he was able to discover and photograph, which of course we've got copies of, came out of Lucy Pringle's own research in England, and that was that there was a very close comparison of geometry of the design they came out of in the crystals themselves. That was not the case with HSC. The Spellmans who ran that laboratory, theirs was a different line of structure, but it didn't replicate or mimic in any way the actual design of the formation.
And there were other dissimilarities as well, which I guess we don't really need to go into. And I think that it's probably fair to let people know that HSC Laboratory was also doing these kinds of studies using human blood, and they were closed down because they weren't handling the blood according to the new HIV.
Yeah, it's important to say because, because it's a fact. It was not a healthy end for the laboratory. Right. They actually started in looking at human blood, and moved through into plant analysis and so on. But yeah, you're right. In fact, I do believe that criminal proceedings were also activated there.
Although it's also important, I think, to remember. So one of the things that they did was take the water that they were finding these crystals in, or extracting these crystals from the crop circles, and turning them into little amulets.
Oh, that's right.
That people were wearing. Your brother had one.
Yeah,
still.
No, I'm pleased you remembered that. I had forgotten, but I trust my brother and many others that claim the same thing. My brother to this day wears a little vial that was produced by HSC, filled with the liquid from those crop circles, and as I say, right through to this day, swears that the health problems that he has had over the years were vastly improved, and that he was healthier in the sense of not catching so many viruses and colds and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm pleased you remembered that. So there are many sides to these coins, as we have said when it comes to psychic, interactive type phenomena. It depends what's in your own mind as to how you perceive the reality of those circumstances. And clearly, Peter believed there's a belief component to it. If you don't believe, you can't dowse, if you do believe you can dowse, we can go on forever. But yeah.
And there may have been a very good energetic quality to that water that helped him, which is very possible.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about some more controversial plant analysis done by Dr. Levengood. Yes, we must. Done by Dr. Levengood.
Oh dear, I put the crash helmet on.
So before, let's just take this one step at a time. Did you guys contact Levengood, or did Levengood contact you?
Well, Pan and I were working as a team with Terence Meaden, with Busty Taylor. Pat received a letter. It was Levengood to us.
Do you remember what year it was?
It would have been 89 or 90.
So maybe just after the book was out?
I can't be certain without looking it up. I can't be certain without looking it up. But he saw us on television. That's how he got to know. I think it was Unsolved Mysteries, one of the series that we did that came out of Britain into the United States, which of course was what it was. It was showing these mysterious crop circles. He wrote, I've got a copy of it, Pat gave me, from a Dr. Levengood, Dr. William Levengood at the Pineland Laboratories in Michigan, United States, talking in general that he had a great interest. He was a biologist and would like to receive samples to analyze, which we accommodated. Pat sent them to him. And I think I should, before I overlook it, another extremely important point, when we're looking at the true history of this, those communications, early communications, were labeled up and signed as Dr. Levengood.
Yeah.
In later research, I think it was by the History Channel. I was involved in that program, but it was not my work. I was in touch with the researchers who were researching the content of the first history program for the History Channel, and they looked into the doctor at PhD side of it. I found that in fact he was not a PhD, but it did not take away from the fact he was a qualified biologist. He was working to scientific protocols, and from that perspective, it really didn't change anything for us. The content of his work was looked at, and we need to talk about that. But I think that I know that you and your father also went to his laboratory on kind of my behalf. I was in England, I believe, at the time. But what did you think?
Well, so before we go to that, let's go back to his not being a doctor.
You are bossy.
I am very bossy.
You're terribly bossy.
I am in control of this. This is how our life goes.
It's wonderful. I've got a fire going and I've got a coffee, so why should I worry?
But let's just go back a little bit. So he came into the scene around 89 or 90. He introduced himself to you. He introduced himself as a doctor. Pat started sending him plant samples, and he sent back his analysis of those samples. And you believed you were working with a doctor. At what point did you know that you were not working with a doctor?
Well, when the History Channel
At what year was that?
did their well, you put me on the spot there a little bit. I'm thinking 94, 93, 94. We did a lot of television documentaries around that time. I think it was then. It became known. I'm not so sure they even said so in their documentary. I think they called him Mr. And there were questions then from the certain research fraternity. Why are they calling him Mr.? Mr. Levengood, and others made inquiries then to find that was because he was a Mr.
All right. So one of the things that in the beginning, you weren't doing double-blind studies. He wasn't doing controls. He just wanted to look at the plants and see if he noticed anything different. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh, I will.
No, you will, is that you guys were kind of picking the plants that you thought best represented the phenomenon, which were the plants with this magical bend, because it was before you had really understood that magical bend didn't count.
Well, I won't place that one at our doorstep. It was our team. I think I should just say.
No, but I think it was a valid thing to be doing because you were just trying to establish, was there something?
Well, but I think primarily that came from those people, those others that were working with us. We had the basic team, as we said, Terence Meaden, myself, Pat Delgado, Bustitaner, extended and expanded over the years to include a number of really helpful people, good people. The Witcher's team, as we called them, another 4, and it was added to as the years went on. But these were the people that we offered on a request from Nancy Talbot of the BLT group, Levengood's group. Did we have individuals they could go to be their team on the ground?
Okay, so I want to go before that. I want to go to before Levengood met Talbot and everything else, when he was just working with you and Pat. He was looking at plants that he believed came from crop circles. Every plant he saw were things that you handpicked because you believe they represented the phenomenon.
Yes, and I was trying to say that others that came after us did the same.
Yes.
And so he thought that what he was looking at was something outstanding, when in fact they were the best samples that we felt that could be sent.
And those best samples, what he saw was that the nodal points of these plants were being burst open with high energy.
He thought microwave. He called them exploded cavities. And the farming community lifted their eyes pretty well immediately, as being kind of like pretty natural. So that is what he said. Yes.
Okay, and so then Nancy Talbot shows up in our office in Connecticut, and she wants to get involved with the science. She's very intent that she needs to get involved with the science, and so you hook her up with Dr. Levengood, and she was what was John Burke? John Burke,
yeah.
Form this team who are just doing plant analysis. Levengood, Talbot, and Burke, they call themselves BLT. And Burke has his own interesting theory about water and chalk.
Yeah, yes, he did. He was an electrical engineer that's kind of fitted well with myself and Pat Delgado. His theory was that most of these circles were appearing on a roughly triangular area in central southern England, which was in fact the geostructure, its geology was chalk. And that is correct. There was our data that he was looking at, and that is a fact. And so the chalk, which is fossilized sea life, goes down hundreds of feet, it's deep, and acts as a sponge. It's not like we're sat on a rock shelf here in Connecticut. It's non-porous. That's in England, southern England, in that area, completely porous. So the further you have heavier rain periods of rain, the more water is held in the reservoir, underground reservoir of the chalk composites. As that dries out, and the drier periods and maybe drought years, of course that drops away, and the movement of that large volume of water within the geostructure of southern England causes, he says, a static buildup. And that static that rises to the surface discharges in some miraculous kind of fashion. I'm sorry for my sarcasm, but it's that's the big question. Even if that should be so, one, it has not been measured before. Two, if it happens, how in the world do all of these electrons and electrostatic charge create a plant collapse as a geometry in the geometries that actually exist on that chalk in southern England? So for us, it was a non-starter. The fact that it's based upon absolutely true science. Water's going up and down. It is in a geology that is porous, but the electrostatic side lost. I would like just to say this because I feel I'm hearing myself talking on with BLT. It has never been that to disagree with somebody, and in this case BLT, that it means it's me versus them. It has never been that way with me. It's been interpreted that way by many, that I just don't like BLT. It was never the case. I don't have that kind of personality with most people. It is true, one or two have gotten the wrong side because they're unfair and whatever. But that I need to say that because there's a lot of courage involved with each of those three individuals in stepping out and doing a job that many were afraid to do, for professional reasons. So I have actually a lot of to be grateful for, but I don't agree with their findings, and I'm entitled to do that. I just feel to get it off my chest a little bit. Nobody's paying the bills, as you know. Nobody is paying the bills. You pay the bills, Cynthia. This is the bill payer. Nobody else is paying the bills. So this is kind of a private research, which I've always been completely happy to share with anybody. I have never, for example, asked to speak and present at any single presentation, but I have spoken to hundreds, and that is because I have been asked to speak and have been happy to do so. And so what we're doing now in this program is sharing the data, trying to get a real and true perspective on what has happened. Some of this was agonizing for me personally. I received threats. I got stuff through the mail. It was a very difficult time, but holding that ground simply because that appeared to be the truth.
So we're talking.
So that's where I just need to say that.
Absolutely, an important perspective to have. That although it seemed that there were personalities at conflict with each other, your conflict was over the science of it. And so just to take it the step further, after it was determined by Levengood that there were expulsion cavities in the nodal points, then it moved beyond looking to see if anything was happening to, can we demonstrate that only happens in the circle and not in the outside? So now it becomes a scientific protocol. And at this point, Nancy asked you for a team of people who can do collection inside and outside of circles for them. And you've been working with a team of people from Whitchurch for years. They are wonderful people who have been very loyal to you, very good friends. Shelley Keel and her son, Gary and James.
Yeah.
And so the three of them, and I think spouses and people, become involved in collecting for Levengood, and they're collecting things inside, they're collecting things outside. I think it's fair to say that all of us are impacted by our own bias. We want to show the best of what's in the circle. We want to show how different it is outside of the circle. There may have been some selection bias. I don't actually think it matters, but I think it needs to be said because that has been one of the criticisms. But what you began to notice and what this team of collectors began to notice is that it didn't matter whether they were collecting inside of a crop circle or lodged plants that had fallen down, but they started to come back as both being positive from the control plants that were standing straight up in the field. And you noticed other things, so why don't you?
Yeah, I think that best demonstrated by a double blind that I did. I think it's the best way of demonstrating what happened.
So before we even go to that, we just have to lay the bricks here a little bit. So the first thing that you noticed was that plants that laid down had the expulsion cavities, whether they were laid down because they were in a crop circle or because they were lodged, and they didn't have the expulsion cavities when they were growing straight up. And that started to raise some questions. And you also noticed another thing. I think the team noticed another thing, that whenever they put in their notes, this was a phenomenally interesting circle, that came back as having really high energy, whereas they said, oh, this probably isn't anything. It came back as not being of high energy.
Right.
So everybody wanted a double-blind study. Everybody wanted Levengood to just have no idea where the plant came from.
But nobody had the courage to do it.
People asked him and he said no. He didn't want to do double blinds. So you created a double blind.
I created it. I knew I was going to get hammered for it.
Yes.
But it had to be done. I was doing most of the international commentary on this, traveling the world, stating what I was being told from Dr. Levin or Mr. Levengood. So it had to be done. And I set it up to with his team, and were jointly my team.
Mhm.
But they were the same people that he'd received many samples over a number of years by this time. And so I went out to a field south of Andover, where there had been a little bit of lodging caused by the heavy rain. I spoke to the farmer, Jeff Smith at the time. He agreed for us to come over and start and do the double blind. So with the newspaper and the date on that newspaper in front of the camera, started the camera rolling, and there was a virgin empty field except for a little lodging that had washed off a nearby highway and flattened the plants. And so the plants were sampled from the lodging that we already knew the cause of, and James and the team constructed on the camera their own crop circle, and the samples were taken from that too. So they were.
Can I interrupt for a moment? Did you leave it overnight, or did you take the samples right away?
I believe they were taken right away.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I do, but yes, they were. In fact, they were, because I can remember the process. And so what came back was, let me just say, I want to just repeat clearly the same that you have stated, that the pattern that we were reacting to was more about the appearance of where the samples came from, rather than whatever he was actually finding. Because when they said looks like a good formation, a real formation, looks that way, no foot marks, whatever, and compared to it looks rough, probably not valid, the results consistently came back to support their perspective, their view. This one is of high energy. Well, here we had two that we knew were, one made by weather, the other one made by people, came back as the highest, the best looking formation, the highest energy he had ever seen. And the real deal.
The control in that field came back negative?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's interesting I know you have been hammered for doing that. You tricked him, you did this, you did that. I don't think so. I think that was fair science.
But I think it was a turning point. It wasn't accepted, but I think it was a turning point. And where are we today? We are exactly there.
So one of the things that has been postulated that I have certainly thought, and I don't know whether, I think it originally came from you, is that once a plant was laid down in the field, the impact of the sun on those nodal points, those knuckles between the growth areas of the plant that allow the plant to move up and down, that the water that collects in those nodal points is impacted by the sun differently than if it's standing up. The angle of the sun hitting it is different. It's magnified. It can create an expansion of the water, creating these expulsion cavities. But if those samples were taken before that had laid in the sun for a day, that kind of blows that theory out of the water.
Well, I guess it is what it is, as they say. Yes, it does, that particular theory. I don't think it affects the fact that the result is the result.
Yeah. So,
but I take a fair point, and again to clarify that yes, it did come from me. That was that when a plant or thousands of plants move from the vertical with air surrounding each of those plants to the horizontal, where there is only air on the surface of the surface plants, that the temperature increase shielded by the standing crop around a nearby, especially in an exceptionally hot British summer day, which can be 35 degrees centigrade or so. Now you've got superheated internal moisture in those plants, which is going to certainly minimally assist the expulsion cavities to expel that moisture.
So that takes us to a whole different place, and I'm not sure I'm ready to go there yet. However, if we go back, so Levengood had created, very.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you a second?
Of course.
Because I'm just cut what you said in half. Is to say that that blows the theory. It doesn't completely, because the circle was man-made there on the spot, and the samples were removed. That is true, but the lodging had been there for days.
Yes.
So the lodging had the plants in the normal circumstance of being flat to the ground, shielded by the plants.
And under the influence of the sun.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it's going to be a
Yeah.
bigger conversation. It's going
Okay.
to be looking through the database.
I'll get a new crash helmet.
We're going to have to get our volunteers in the database. But anyway, what we were talking about. Okay,
Yeah.
so Levengood. Okay, so Levengood has this very well documented. These are in the circle. These are out of the circles. These are the changes, photographs, the expulsion cavities, his probabilities and statistics all worked out. He gets published in Nature magazine. It's a huge breakthrough as far as the crop circle community is concerned, and really bolsters their belief that this is a phenomenon that cannot be made by people. And certainly everybody was excited, except for you, because you didn't really think it was accurate.
I didn't believe it.
And then about not even 6 months later, Nature pulls it. And do you know why Nature pulled it?
I think they questioned the same thing as I did. I've not seen it in writing, however, why, and they've never answered it.
Yeah.
As far as I know, they've never gone into writing to us. They clearly would have done to Levengood.
They did an article about removing it, and it might be because they learned he wasn't a doctor, or it might have been because the science wasn't right. But
I don't have it to pull in front of me.
Yeah.
But it was the fact that once again, the bottom line is they pulled it, and that's a big deal for Nature magazine. Allegedly peer reviewed, published, and withdrawn.
Yeah.
That speaks as support. I don't need support for what I felt myself, because I'm not a biologist.
Right.
It was simply more of a hunch than it was anything else. But it still supports the fact that way back in 1990, Sheffield were right.
Yes, there was no difference in the plants from inside and outside.
No difference. So we'll end this now, and bye-bye.
My trip with my father to Levengood's lab. So Pinelandia Laboratory was inside of Dr. Levengood's house. It was in his garage that he had remade. I think it was a garage. I'm not really sure. It was very well, documented and designed and laid out. We never saw any of his protocols. All we saw were the plants, and I can't say that having seen just the plants and the end result and not knowing what the protocols were that got him there, I can't say that we can say that the science was good or was bad. I don't know. I think we were all really just there trying to know each other a little bit, and I don't think any of us actually liked each other.
It's not hard to believe if my name was mentioned. According to Levengood, I couldn't even spell his name right.
So what this leaves us with, what we're left wondering about, is what role Levengood had to play. All of the legitimacy of the crop circles being made not by people but by another energy were being laid at his door. And we don't know that his research was correct. We don't know whether it was incorrect out of bias and inattentional blindness or intention. And if it was intention, who was sponsoring him in this position? Was there some other reason why things were being pushed in the direction that they were going to be pushed in? And I think that we don't have to answer that now. We're going to be talking a lot more. I think our next episode is going to be about anomalous phenomenon and the extraordinary things and the development of consciousness through these crop circles, which is, I think, where the true story is.
It's bigger than anything I ever imagined.
Yeah.
In fact, it is extraordinary how it hasn't been missed. People listen to you. They've had, in some cases, their own experiences, but somehow you see this cloud of denial run across them, just as it has with the media. And they've now just moved on, leaving the very most important situation here that needs to be stated. Yeah. Could I just one second go back to say that my hunch with Levengood was that he got lost in the weeds. I think he was a genuine person coming up with early in the first results of any kind of any research in the United States. Britain had done some. He did the first, kicked it off, and was getting somewhere, thought he had something. And I think he was so central to the scientific peg on this that he started to get lost and under pressure of having then to find and repeat what he'd already stated was happening. So, I mean, you know, a little bit of a woolly answer perhaps, but I think he got lost. I just can't quite see that it was deliberate.
Yeah, I don't think it was deliberate either. It's hard for me to imagine it. And
Yeah.
I respect, like you do, anybody who's willing to step out in front of the firing line and take the heat. I respect them, you know, whether I agree with their findings or not. I think that took a lot of courage and bravery.
Yeah.
So I think that concludes today, but check in next time because it's going to be a happen
Oh
program.
my, it's going to get very, very hairy.
We're going to have to keep a fire extinguisher.
As you can see, these interviews are not easy.
No.
They are not easy.
I'm a hard taskmaster. All right. Well, thanks so much. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.